Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to try and untangle the American political system. It can feel, a little complicated, but stick with me, and by the end of this, you'll have a much clearer picture of how the whole game is played.
So let's just dive right in with a question I think is on everyone's mind. Why does American politics always feel like it's just two teams on the field? It's almost always the Democrats versus the Republicans. How on earth did we get here?
Well, the answer really starts with this core idea, the two-party system. And this isn't just some casual rivalry like a sports league. No, this is a really powerful structure where these two major parties dominate pretty much everything, from your local city council all the way up to the White House. Okay, so let's meet the main characters in this story. We all know the mascots, right? The donkey and the elephant. But let's get past the symbols and look at what they actually represent today. If you boil it all down, the two parties have a really different philosophy about the government's job. Democrats tend to believe that a strong, active government is the best way to solve problems and help people. On the other side, you have the Republicans, or the GOP, who argue for more individual freedom and less government interference, letting the free market do its thing. And you can really see how those big ideas trickle down into actual policies. Take taxes, for example. Democrats often want to see higher taxes on the wealthiest to pay for social programs. Republicans, they generally push for lower taxes across the board to boost the economy. It's that same fundamental disagreement about the role of government, just playing out in things like healthcare or how much we spend on the military. Okay, but here is where the story gets really interesting, like a huge plot twist. If you think you know what these parties have always stood for, well, think again. It wasn't always this way, not even close. This might sound crazy, but the parties basically did a complete 180 on each other. I mean, the Republican Party of Abraham Lincoln, that was the progressive anti-slavery party. Then, starting around the 1930s with FDR's New Deal, you see the script start to flip. By the 1960s, when the Democratic Party fully embraced the civil rights movement, many Southern conservatives moved over to the Republican Party, a shift that Ronald Reagan really cemented in the 80s. So, knowing that history is absolutely crucial, but it's really only half the story. To truly understand why the two-party system is so locked in, you have to know the specific rules of the game, especially when it comes to electing a president. The path to the presidency isn't a single sprint. It's more like a four-stage marathon. First, you have the primaries, which is basically the playoffs where each party picks its champion. Then you have the national conventions, which are like the big pep rallies to make it official. After that comes the main event, the general election, where millions of us vote. But the race still isn't over. The final, and honestly the most controversial step, is the Electoral College. Now, here's a subtle but super important rule that helps keep the two big parties on top. It's called plurality voting. It means you don't actually need to get over 50% of the vote to win. You just need more votes than any other candidate. So why does that matter? Well, it creates a huge mental barrier for third parties, because a lot of voters worry that voting for a smaller party is just throwing your vote away. So they end up picking one of the two big players that they think can actually win. And that brings us right back to the Electoral College. Because most states have this winner-takes-all rule, it's totally possible for a candidate to win the popular vote, getting more individual votes across the entire country, and still lose the presidency. The 2016 election is the perfect modern-day example of this. Hillary Clinton got almost 3 million more votes nationwide, but Donald Trump won more of the electoral votes, and that's what gets you the keys to the White House. Okay, so the election's over, a winner is declared, then what? That brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, how power is actually structured and, maybe more importantly, how it's kept in check. So first, you've got the president, who is the head of the executive branch. Their number one job is to take the laws passed by Congress and make sure they're actually carried out and enforced. Then you have Congress, which is the legislative branch. It's split into two parts, the House of Representatives and the Senate. And you can think of them as the nation's writers. They're the ones who debate and create the laws in the first place. And finally, we have the judicial branch, led by the Supreme Court. They're like the referees. They don't write the laws, and they don't enforce them, but they have the incredibly important job of interpreting those laws and deciding if they're in line with the Constitution. Now, this whole setup was completely intentional. It was designed to create what we call checks and balances. Think of it like a constant game of rock, paper, scissors. Congress can pass a law, but the president can veto it. But then Congress can override that veto if they have enough votes. And even if they do, the Supreme Court can come in and strike the whole law down. It's a never-ending push and pull.
All right, we have covered a lot of ground. So let's zoom out for a second. What's the big picture? Let's put all these pieces together.
So you see, the American political system is so much more than just a simple rivalry. It's this complex machine. It's built on a wild history where the parties literally traded places. It's held in place by election rules that make it almost impossible for a third party to break through. And it's all governed by a structure that was specifically designed to split power up and make sure no one part gets too strong. Which, of course, leaves us with one final huge question to chew on. This system has been locked in for generations. It seems so permanent. But is it? Is the structure just too strong? Or could a third party ever actually break through and change the game? Something to think about. Thanks for watching.